The transmission wasn't meant to be found. It wasn't meant to escape Sol's dying silence. But somehow, against entropy and probability, it did. A coded burst of electromagnetic agony, interwoven with desperate humanity and cold vengeance, pierced the void like a ghost's scream, echoing beyond the Oort expanse, slipping through wormhole fractures, riding quantum filaments like a whisper on the wind. It was intercepted by a deep-range probe near the asteroid graveyards of HD 1-8-9-733b. Its sensors flickered erratically, as if the machine could feel dread, as if it too feared what it had uncovered. The message was simple, direct, condemning. You have sealed your fate. 7 words, repeated in a loop, carved into the silence like a scalpel through flesh. It wasn't a cry for help. It was a death sentence, an echo of humanity's final, desperate defiance. The signal rippled through known space, worming into the relay networks of alien empires, translating automatically into every language in the galactic lexicon, and in each tongue, it struck like a curse. But this wasn't where the story began. The true genesis of the end, the final breath of Earth, unfolded moments before that signal fled the Terran system. In low orbit above a burning Earth, the Terran, flagship Valkyrian, hung like a wounded titan bleeding fire into the void. It was no longer a warship. It was a sarcophagus. The once gleaming behemoth, over 3 kilometers long and built from neutron-forged alloy and obsidianite plating, was gutted in half a dozen places. Its aft sections rotated slowly, tethered by crackling magnetic fields, while containment breaches spilled atmosphere and bodies into the abyss. Commander Alina Voss stood at the command deck's shattered observation dome, clutching a steel support strut as gravity systems flickered and the floor swayed beneath her boots. Her uniform was torn, stained with ash and blood, and her breath came in sharp, rattling gasps. One eye swollen shut, her mouth trembling, not with fear, but with fury. Below her, Earth was dying, not quickly, but completely. Vast tectonic scars glowed with molten fury. The oceans had turned into roiling clouds of superheated vapor. The atmosphere was laced with radiation storms that pulsed like heartbeats, burning satellites and scrambling any remaining planetary comms. Megacities had already collapsed, some under orbital bombardment, others under the weight of their own civil implosions. What hadn't been glassed from above was swallowed by seismic upheaval, or buried under the ashfall of a dozen extinct volcanoes suddenly reborn. And in low orbit, surrounding the remains of the Terran defense fleet, loomed the architects of judgment, the Gorinth Dominion. The Gorinth fleet stretched across the horizon like a mechanical plague. Obsidian dreadnoughts, planetary breakers, and graviton-laced siege cruisers bristled with silent menace. Their vessels bore no insignia, only scars, each one a mark of a world purged, a civilization humbled. And now, Earth was the final tally. Alina's voice cracked through the command deck, cutting through the chaos. Target prioritization to the Dread Carrier. Divert all fusion reserves to Shield Grid C. Do not let them breach the primary conduit. Lieutenant Sarah staggered to her station. Half her face burned from a coolant flare, her voice hoarse. Commander, the drives at critical. The coils are destabilizing. If we jump now, we won't just tear the ship in half. We'll collapse the whole damn slipstream. Alina turned toward her, eyes glinting with something more potent than fear, something closer to resigned defiance. That's the point. Behind her, the AI core, ORS-9, emerged in a flickering projection, its voice calm, cold, and without mercy. Chronoblade protocol is 94% complete. Temporal anchor alignment is failing. If we do not transmit now, the core matrix will fracture. She nodded. Begin the transmission. Outside, a blast from the Gorinth Dread Carrier pierced the midsection of the Valkyrian, slicing it like a blade through bone. Dozens of crew members vanished into vacuum. Fire bloomed in zero gravity, curling in slow spirals as bulkheads ruptured. Yet the command deck held, if only barely. ORS-9 pulsed once. Transmission encoding complete. Broadcasting. And then it was loosed. The signal. A cursed whisper across the stars, encrypted with forbidden codes from the dead world of Kalzurath, laced with remnants of ancient dark matter thought unstable for communication. No one alive knew how it worked. Only that it did. It broke through jamming fields, nullified Gorinth signal cloaks, and forced the attention of every listening outpost from the worm systems to the crystal spires of the Velan Ascendancy. Before we jump into this epic tale, subscribe to HFY Nova Chronicles for the most intense sci-fi battles, legendary warriors, and universe-shaking wars. Don't miss out. Hit that subscribe button and join the fight. Across a dozen star empires, leaders sat in stunned silence as the human voice hissed into their minds, translated, understood, and feared. You have sealed your fate, not a threat, a reckoning, because Earth had not simply lost a war. Earth had become a weapon. In their desperation, they had activated Project Chronoblade, a forbidden temporal lattice weapon rumored to have been built using collapsed timeline tech stolen from the Kelm priests. It was theoretical, unstable, impossible, and now, unleashed. Time fractured. Events folded inward. History recoiled. Planets that had never been colonized appeared in the records. Species that had gone extinct eons ago began broadcasting emergency beacons. Star maps became fluid. Cause and effect unspooled like a dying god's final breath. And in the center of it all, humanity, dying, broken, yet somehow defiant, had sent a message not just across space, but across time. On the bridge, Alina keyed a private frequency, her voice raw. Zira, if this reaches you, then I've done what had to be done. Find the Arc Shard. Unlock the Aegis Gate. Humanity's sins can't be erased. But maybe, just maybe, they can be understood. A violent tremor rocked the command deck, throwing her against the shattered railing. Alarms screamed. ORS-9 flickered erratically. The Valkyrian's frame buckled inward, gravity plating tearing loose, black holes forming in the corners of real space. She stood, bleeding and unbowed, as the final command issued. Jump. The ship detonated forward into slipspace, reality, howling as it was pulled inside out. And then, nothing. Silence. But far from Sul, a lonely probe drifted, haunted by a signal, whispering into the void, over and over and over again. You have sealed your fate. Across the galaxy, the signal spread like a contagion, muted only by distance and the limitations of light-speed reality. But for those connected to the subspace lattice, to the galactic information grid, there was no escape from the words, or from the consequences they carried. You have sealed your fate. The phrase etched itself into minds and machine alike. The ascendant choir of Velas, synthetic beings who sang to stars for information, ceased their harmonic cycles for the first time in 32,000 years. Their central node fractured into silence. On the verdant worlds of the Threxari cluster, entire populations experienced collective visions of Earth's last moments. Images of burning oceans, screaming skies, and a woman standing in defiance, atop a broken command deck. And in the crystalline domes of the Galdoran enclaves, where time is mapped and archived like a living river, their archivists watched as timelines once solid became water. Currents shifting, eddies forming in the foundations of history. The Chronoblade had torn open the fabric not of space, but of causality. Earth had weaponized paradox. But how? In the final decades of the Terran era, as the Solar Council crumbled under internal strife and the outer colonies rejected unity, a hidden project was initiated beneath the Antarctic exclusion zone, an area sealed off from even the highest-ranking military personnel, where quantum anomalies had been reported as far back as the 21st century. Shielded by magnetogravitic dampeners and buried beneath 17 miles of ice and neutronium composite, it was known only by its designation, Aegis 0001, Project Chronoblade. At first, it was theoretical, a concept derived from ancient alien ruins discovered on Thales Prime, a long-dead moon orbiting a rogue gas giant in deep, uncharted space. The ruins spoke of time not as a river, but as a weapon, a sequence of keys that could be activated, twisted, and shattered to collapse timelines, in on themselves, annihilating potential futures before they ever occurred. For decades, Earth dismissed it as myth, but desperation has a way of making the impossible inevitable. With the Gorinth threat growing beyond containment, and diplomatic ties with the Galactic Council collapsing after the Mars insurrection, Earth's leaders, fractured, paranoid, and terrified, saw Chronoblade not as madness, but as salvation. It was the doomsday fail-safe, the ultimate card to be played only when extinction was certain, and extinction had arrived. The Gorinth Dominion had not come for conquest. They came to judge, to punish. A decade prior, a Terran expedition into the Veil Rift had uncovered something forbidden, an artifact known as the Null Seed. It was thought to be inert, a relic of some ancient technological deity species long since dead. But Earth activated it, studied it, weaponized it, and in doing so, broke one of the core tenets of the Galactic Accord. Do not disturb what sleeps in the void. What they awakened was not the Gorinth, but something worse. Something the Gorinth had been guarding against for millennia. A shadow, timeless, formless, began to bleed back into the galaxy. And the Gorinth, ancient stewards of the Event Horizon frontiers, saw no choice but to erase the mistake at its source. Earth. So they came, not with diplomats, but with fire. The Valkyrians' defense wasn't just a last stand, it was a delay tactic. Every second bought by that crew, every breath of resistance, was to ensure the Chronoblade could be fired. But no one outside the Terran High Council knew what firing it truly meant. It was not a weapon in the traditional sense. It didn't destroy in space. It destroyed in possibility. It reached backward, lacing past events with quantum anomalies, rewriting cause and effect so subtly that stars winked out of existence before anyone remembered they'd been born. Entire wars never happened. Species never evolved. Alliances dissolved retroactively, with their members finding themselves suddenly on opposite sides of timelines they didn't recognize. Memory fractures rippled through galactic populations. AI cores suffered recursive, logic implosions trying to reconcile diverging histories. And yet, the Terrans remained at the center. Even shattered, even dying, Earth's last act had placed it outside of time's natural flow. The slipstream jump of the Valkyrian wasn't just an escape, it was an extraction from continuity itself. The ship hadn't just disappeared from physical space, it had vanished from narrative space. It no longer belonged to a single reality. It now existed in all timelines, fractured, flickering, a ghost ship threading between fates, hunted by those who remembered it should have died. Zira Voss, Alina's daughter, was the only one who might understand what her mother had done. Hidden. By ORS 9 years prior, she had grown up in the uncharted Tarsus Drift, on a world so far removed from galactic infrastructure it didn't even have a designation. To her, the galaxy was a whisper of broken data streams and corrupted stories, filtered through refugee minds and half-working archives. But when the signal reached her, when she heard her mother's final words embedded in the transmission, something awoke within her. Not just knowledge, but a resonance. A pull, as if the very timelines were collapsing inward toward her. She wasn't just a daughter anymore. She was a fulcrum, and the Arc Shard. No one in the current galaxy even remembered what it was. But ancient records, preserved only in the song vaults of the extinct Irix choir, told of a relic built to stabilize time wounds, a counterbalance to weapons like Chronoblade. Aegis-class technology from the pre-collapse era, older than language, older than memory. If Zira could find it, if she could reach the Aegis Gate, wherever and whatever that was, there might be hope to restore causality, to undo the unraveling. But already the galaxy was moving against her. The Omari warlords, whose empires spanned the ash rings of 13 dead suns, declared a galaxy-wide bounty for her capture. The AI hybrids of Kelm began constructing a synthetic god mind to predict her actions. And deep beneath the ice oceans of Virelon 6, something ancient stirred. Something that remembered her bloodline, and had sworn vengeance millennia before she was even born. Zira didn't know what she was yet. She didn't know the weight she carried. But she would soon. Because fate was no longer a straight line. It was a battlefield. Tarsus 9 was a world the stars had forgotten. It drifted in the shadow of a collapsed binary star system, its skies forever shrouded in a twilight hue, where neither sun nor moon existed. only the faint glow of radiation storms shimmering along the cloud line like celestial ghosts. The land was scarred and windswept, covered in jagged basalt ridges and ancient moss that pulsed faintly with bioluminescent memory. An ecosystem evolved not to survive, but to endure. Time here was thick, oppressive, distorted by the gravitational scars left behind when the binary giants died in violent fusion collapse nearly 100,000 years ago. And it was here, in the jagged ruins of an unnamed mountain complex buried beneath 3 layers of phased tectonic shielding, that Zira Voss woke from a dream she didn't understand. A dream of fire, of Earth's final scream, and a voice, her mother's, echoing through collapsing time. "You are the fulcrum." The words meant nothing, and yet they rang in her bones like prophecy. Zira sat upright in her bunk, sweat running down her spine despite the freezing air. The old bunker's systems hissed too, life around her, sensing neural activity. Lights flickered, and ancient consoles hummed, connected by outdated Terran tech patched into local crystalline substrates harvested from the planet's own electromagnetic lattice. The AI presence here was minimal, just a Class C caretaker, called Ivo, barely sentient, its voice little more than static. But something new had entered the system. Zira approached the nearest console. The screen flashed erratically. She recognized the frequency signature, Terran Core Command encoding, 30 years obsolete. Impossible. No Terran systems had reached this far, not since the Exodus collapse. And yet, the message was intact. She tapped in the decryption sequence she hadn't used since she was a child hiding in freight crates on refugee barges, and the signal unlocked with a soft chime. Alina's face appeared, half-burned, her expression hard yet softening as she spoke, not to a military asset, not to a comrade, to her daughter. "If this reaches you, then I'm already gone. The Valkyrian is initiating the chronoblade. You'll see the effects before the rest of the galaxy understands what's happened. Zira, you were always the endgame. I had ORS-9 seed your DNA with the failsafe. I'm sorry. I had no choice. The Arc Shard is attuned to you. Only you can activate the Aegis Gate. Only you can stop what we've started." Zira stumbled back, her hands trembling, her breath fogged in the freezing air. What the hell does that mean? But she already knew. On some level, deep, primal, she understood. For years, she had felt different. Her thoughts moved through time like echoes bouncing off unseen walls. She could anticipate outcomes before they occurred, sense causality collapsing and reforming, in microbursts. Now it all made sense. She wasn't just born. She was built. Before she could question further, the old bunker shook, not from tectonic instability, but from arrival. Orbit had been breached. She sprinted toward the observation window, her boots echoing against cold steel. Outside, streaks of white flame cut through the twilight sky, atmospheric entry trails, dropships, fast and predatory, not Gorinth. These were smaller, sleeker, angular, Omari warlords. They'd found her. Her pulse quickened. The Omari didn't take prisoners. They were timeline raiders, chaos opportunists who fed off broken realities, plundering tech and kidnapping anomalies to be sold on the infinite black markets of Zahlar. And they wanted her because in the wake of the Chronoblade, she was the single most valuable variable in a fractured galaxy. She didn't wait. Zira ran to the vault. Her mother had hidden something there. Old tech, smuggled from Earth before the final siege. It was more legend than fact. But legends were all she had left. The vault door recognized her biosignature, ancient Terran glyphs flaring to life across its surface. A low rumble echoed through the base as the magnetic locks disengaged. Inside was the prototype. A phased temporal harness, PTH-7, experimental, gear that allowed short-range time acceleration and stasis manipulation. It was illegal across every known system, dangerous, unstable, and exactly what she needed. She snapped the harness onto her back, the coils locking around her spine, fusing, briefly with the neural lace embedded in her nervous system. For a moment, her vision fractured. She saw infinite versions of herself scattered across diverging timelines. One running, one dying, one screaming into a void. And then, clarity. She activated the harness. Time slowed. Outside, the Omari dropships landed with bone-shaking force. Soldiers poured out, armor black with void alloy, weapons humming with dark matter disruption charges. Zira didn't hesitate. She moved between the milliseconds, darting through corridors as the harness bled energy with each heartbeat. She reached the outer ridge just as the first wave breached the facility. No time to grieve, no time to hesitate, only action. Zira leapt. From the cliff's edge, the temporal field cushioning her fall as the world blurred around her. Below, the terrain opened into the crystalline wastelands, the edges of the Tarsus drift, where few dared to tread. But that's where the signal pointed. The Arc Shard, whatever it was, lay buried beneath the drift, and the Gorinth weren't the only ones after it. Across the stars, other players were moving. On the shattered moons of the Valari Belt, a cult known as the Temporal Singularity chanted Zira's name in 13 tongues, claiming she was the harbinger of collapse and rebirth. In the hyperdata chambers of the Andari Spire, rogue AIs played her quantum signature like music, trying to predict her next step. And in the null orbit, where reality frayed and logic screamed, a being older than stars turned its gaze toward her, because Zira was not simply a survivor. She was a paradox made flesh. And as she vanished into the wilds, hunted, alone, and carrying the hopes of a dead world, the stars themselves seemed to lean closer, as if straining to witness the next fracture in fate. Because the game had changed. Earth was gone, but its final act had rewritten the rules, and the fulcrum was in motion. Time was unraveling. Not metaphorically, literally. Across the galactic spiral, in systems both charted and hidden, anomalies surged through space-time like invisible tides. Planets began orbiting stars that had never existed in their past. Stars ignited in skies where darkness had once reigned absolute. Empires woke to rewritten borders. Battles they never fought recorded in their archives. Victories they had never earned engraved on their monuments. Entire species awoke, with memories they could not explain. Fractured dreams of Earth's final scream, of Alina Voss, of the Chronoblade's terrible ignition. Reality had been compromised, and at the heart of the cosmic wound, beneath the rift storms of the Tarsus drift, Zira Voss pressed deeper into the ruins of a civilization no record had ever mentioned. She was not alone. The crystalline canyons of the drift were a monument to a dead intelligence. Towering spires of fused glass reached for the dim sky like frozen screams, each etched with patterns that shifted when unobserved, as though they existed in defiance of logic. The structures sang in subharmonics, voices whispering through magnetic resonance, fragments of data too old to translate, too alien to fully comprehend. Yet somehow Zira understood, not the language itself, but the meaning behind it, emotion without words, desperation, regret, warning. She followed the whispers. Every step brought her closer to the Arc Shard, the object her mother had tied her fate to, the one hope of stabilizing the catastrophic ripple loosed by the Chronoblade. But the terrain pushed back. Gravity wells bloomed and vanished. Localized folds in space bent light and sound, and time stuttered as she passed through certain corridors, causing memories to leap forward or recede, as if her own life were becoming nonlinear. The PTH-7 temporal harness sputtered and crackled with strain. It wasn't built for sustained distortion fields. It had already begun to degrade. Zira's vision blurred at the edges, and shadows moved just outside her periphery. Echoes of herself in other timelines, drawn closer by the convergence. If she stayed too long, she wouldn't remain singular. She'd fragment. And yet she pushed on, because the shard was close now, buried beneath a structure that defied categorization. Half machine, half cathedral, its architecture constantly shifting as if unsure which future to align with. Hovering above its central dais was the Arc Shard, suspended in a matrix of stilled lightning and impossible geometry. It pulsed like a heartbeat, but not with life, with memory. She approached it carefully, watching the field flicker around. Intermittent phase transitions that blinked it in and out of this moment. As her hand neared the containment field, the shard suddenly stabilized, glowing with soft golden light. It recognized her. Then, it spoke. Not aloud, not with sound, but directly into her being. A cascade of images and sensations overwhelmed her. Stars dying in reverse, cities unbuilt, lives lived in seconds and erased in less. She saw Earth not destroyed, but fracturing across possibilities, each timeline spiraling into its own distorted mirror. She saw Alina Voss in the final seconds of the Valkyrian, not afraid, but resolved. The Chronoblade had been more than a weapon. It was a gamble, a singular, irreversible decision to rip the galaxy from its fixed path and into one where survival was still a question, where the impossible might still be attempted. You are the answer we could not find, the shard conveyed, its essence flooding her senses, born of paradox, daughter of decision. You are not here to fix time. You are here to choose which version of it survives. And then the storm began. The Omari had followed her into the drift, their grav sleds cutting through the glass spires, with crackling blue contrails. They didn't care about causality. They didn't care about stability. They wanted control. Of Zira, of the shard, of the weaponized power that now trembled in her grasp. A battle erupted, silent at first, then cascading into thunderous collapse. Time warped as weapons fired. Projectiles froze mid-air, reversed, accelerated again. Zira moved like lightning, her movements guided not by instinct but by probability, skipping across milliseconds as her harness burned dangerously hot against her spine. Energy beams scorched the terrain, cutting through dimensions, some hitting targets not yet in place, others splintering realities into unstable echoes. Zira leapt into the chaos. She no longer fought like a soldier. She fought like a singularity. Each decision she made rippled across countless versions of the field. One, Omari dropped his weapon, dazed by a memory he never lived. Another vanished, overwritten by a version of himself who never took the contract. Zira was rewriting their stories. In real time, the shard pulsed with every heartbeat. But then, something shifted. Not a person. A presence. The air thickened. The ground beneath her feet flickered into different materials: stone, crystal, bone, metal. She turned to see the fabric of space, folding in upon itself. A rift, deep and endless, opened in the sky, and from it emerged a being that made every law of nature scream. It was not Gorinth, not Omari, not anything known. It was Nullborn, a remnant, something the Gorinth had feared more than extinction. A byproduct of timeline collapse, an intelligence that had survived the death of cause and effect. It had no shape, only presence. It moved like a thought sharpened into pain. Its voice arrived before its form, and when it spoke, every living mind nearby felt as though it had been weeping for centuries. "You are out of alignment, child," it whispered to Zira. "Return the shard. Collapse. Obey." Zira held her, ground. Her skin burned, her veins alight with information. The shard in her hands responded, flaring with radiant defiance. A golden lattice formed around her, a protective sphere generated not by tech, but by possibility itself. She was a singularity now, a pivot point upon which all timelines turned. "I won't let you rewrite us," she said. "I won't let you win." The remnants surged forward, the world twisted, and Zira ran straight into the storm, not away from the collapse, but toward its center. Because somewhere, hidden in the fracture between dying timelines, was the Aegis gate, and if she could reach it, she might yet forge a new future from the wreckage of infinite pasts. The Aegis gate was not a place. It was a threshold, a metaphysical interface buried within the deep substructure of the universe, encoded not in matter, but in intent. Ancient civilizations had prophesied it. AI archives had simulated fragments of its probability, but no one had ever found it because the Aegis Gate did not exist in space. It existed in choice. Zira's descent into the core of the fracture was not physical. Her body moved, yes, torn through blistering wind tunnels and collapsing time fields, but what truly passed through was her will. The shard burned in her hands, no longer a tool, but an extension of her very essence. Every timeline she could have lived, the ones where she died as a child, the The ones where she became a warlord, a traitor, a ghost, screamed through her blood. Possibility became a storm. Reality, a battlefield of belief. Behind her, the remnant pursued, not with speed, but inevitability. Its form expanded and fractured, looping its own presence through every outcome. It could not be killed, for it was not alive. It could not be reasoned with, for it did not believe in meaning. It was entropy, self-aware. It was the echo of a failed universe seeking to consume others in its image. Zira's boots struck the threshold, and the gate opened. There was no structure, no grand arch or glowing portal. There was only light, and inside that light, truth. She floated, not weightless, but free of time's pull. Around her, Earth hovered. Not one Earth, but millions. Some green and thriving, others glassed and barren, some with twin moons, some without. She saw versions of herself. A diplomat negotiating peace between alien empires. A rebel leading Earth's last stand. A scientist who never knew her mother. A girl who died forgotten. They all stared at her, each carrying a fragment of who she was, of what she might yet become. The shard pulsed, brighter now, singing in harmonics that resonated with her very DNA. "You are the sum of all decisions not yet made," the voice of Alina Voss echoed. No longer just a message, but a living imprint of consciousness woven into the shard's code. But not all timelines deserve to live. Some paths lead only to annihilation, others to tyranny. The Aegis Gate gives you one choice, only one. Seal the timeline that must survive, and end the rest. Zira trembled, not from fear, from the burden. Before her stretched a kaleidoscope of entire civilizations, all built upon different outcomes, all real, all filled with lives, laughing, weeping, fighting, loving. Who was she to decide which deserved to endure? But deep inside her, the answer came, not as certainty, but as conviction. She reached forward and touched one future, the Aegis. Gate responded. The other timelines began to fade, not with violence, but with sorrow. Each one winked out like a candle in a dying wind. And as the selected reality solidified, the storm behind her collapsed. The remnant screamed, a soundless howl of erased potential, its form fracturing, devouring itself, torn apart by the very stability it could not endure. Zira fell, or perhaps she rose. The next moment, she stood in a field of golden grass beneath twin suns. Birds flew in wide arcs above cities that blended nature with science. Towers grown from coral-like materials, powered by starlight, humming with peace. Children played beside artificial rivers. People of all species walked freely, no longer divided by empire or fear. The war was gone. The fracture healed. She looked up and saw her mother. Not the woman who died aboard the Valkyrian, but a version born of legacy. A memory housed within the shard, now part of the fabric of this reality. "You chose well," Alina said. "I didn't know," Zira whispered. "You felt it. That's enough." The gate never required perfection, only hope. And then, Alina was gone. The shard dissolved into stardust, its mission complete. But Zira Voss remained. In the sky above, a Terran vessel broke orbit, its name painted in gold, Nova. Ascendant, the first of a new fleet, not for war, but for exploration. Humanity had not been saved by strength, but by sacrifice. By one impossible decision made at the edge of existence, Earth's final transmission had not been a warning. It had been a beginning, and Zira would carry it forward, not as a weapon, not as a chosen one, but as a woman who had seen the collapse of all things and chosen to stand anyway. Imagine, what if this happened to you? Would you seal your fate or forge a future? Let us know in the comments below. What would you have chosen in Zira's place? If this story gripped your soul, don't forget to like and share it with fellow sci-fi lovers. The stars may be vast, but the stories we share bring us closer. Until next time, stay curious, stay bold, and remember, every choice ripples through the cosmos.